Welcome home, where we provide information, inspiration, and motivator after motivator after motivator here on America's Next. I have Dan Drees here with me today. How you doing, Dan?
I'm doing great. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Long time no nothing.
It has been it's been pretty much since high school. But I gotta ask you something first. You
What's
put
going
me
on?
in the green room for this, and there were like quotes coming up.
Yeah,
Am I the only one who could see those, or could other people see those?
other people see them too.
The expectation is sky high there, then, because the first one I saw was Steve Martin, and I was
Yeah,
like, well, that's a high bar for comedy. This is At least that's as bad as it's gonna get. And then the next one was Martin Luther King. So
right.
I'm gonna fall miserably short of those two quotes. Uh, but no, this is super fun. Yeah, we haven't talked since high school.
Yeah. When you first of all, very exciting show for our viewers today. This will always be a place where you can come for information, education, entertainment, amongst other things. And comedy is something that's very near and dear to me. I'm gonna tell you guys right out front, this man right here has decided to become a comedian. But before we get into that, and then before we get into this mustache, let's talk about the beginning of Dan Drees. Tell us where you grew up at.
Yeah. I grew up in Green Hills, Ohio, which is like, for people who don't know, the school district we went to, Winton Woods, used to be two. It was Forest Park and Green Hills, and then they merged the two of them. And it was really weird because Green Hills is like the predominantly white neighborhood. And what happened when they merged the schools is, for the most part, a lot of those families sent their kids to private schools. And I was homeschooled growing up. Which I've just said that way sooner than I like people to know that about me. Mustache and homeschool is a tough combo.
Right.
But yeah, I was home, so I didn't really know what the school district was. And then I got to high school, and you just shouldn't be a teenage boy living at home with your mom teaching you. So it was like pretty clear I was going to have to go to the high school, or a high school, because I was doing sports and stuff, and the homeschool leagues just are not as good. They are much less competitive.
Right.
So yeah, I started going to Winton Woods High School there, and that was like a really great experience. I loved that school so much. They had a lot of really strong role models. The coaches there were.
Hold on.
Yeah.
We gotta unpack homeschool because.
Oh sure.
I'm sure there's some things in there that were worth knowing about. Hey, most of us don't get to go through homeschool. It's something that, let's say in my case, it's something that I might have heard about, something that I actually saw, even less times than ever heard about it. In fact, I don't know anybody who's effectively homeschooled for a period of years. Tell me, what was that like? Since you saw both, was it easier? Was it harder? Was it more complex? Did you feel like it made you smarter, younger? What's up with it?
It makes you more independent younger, I think. Like, my first year in high school, I really struggled with being on someone else's schedule. Because you really think about, like, especially when you start hitting like sixth grade, middle school, you start being a little more independent. And if you remember those days, like, it's not actually a lot of work you're doing. There's a lot of time being filled. There's a lot of sitting around and filling out worksheets. So what I would do is I would go up in my room, and I'd take all my work in my bedroom. I had a little yellow desk, and I would sit down and I would do like a day's worth of school in like 3 hours. And then I would go to the park and play basketball, or, do something fun for me. So like when I got to high school, I struggled really hard with whenever we had like reading assignments, and they'd be like, oh, you have to read something and then fill out this worksheet. I'd never filled the worksheet. I was always like, well, I read the book. I don't think we need to go through all the semantics here. I know how this works. And I was getting terrible grades my freshman year.
Right. You say you weren't dealing with no semantics your first year of high school, huh?
Oh, I didn't know. I would do it sometimes, like if it was clear I was doing bad in the class, but I was not I didn't understand why people were doing that stuff. So I was like, that was the hardest part of high school for me, was figuring out like, oh, I'm following someone else's rules right now.
Right.
Yeah. But it was a cool setup because my mom was a full-time teacher before she decided to homeschool me and my sisters. So I went into it with like a really good situation where I wasn't dealing with someone who was learning how to teach on the fly. My mom she had years of experience before she decided to do that. So it was, I mean, I couldn't have had a more ideal situation for that.
Right. And I wanted to ask you, you kind of answered my question, but I still want you to talk to the people about it. Does it mean that your parent has to know everything that you're learning? Like, do they have to learn it with you, or are there softwares that you can use? Because I'm like, who remembers everything they learned from K through 12 to be a homeschool teacher?
Oh yeah, that part of it's rough. One of the cool things that happens with that, and this is kind of like a great life lesson to learn early on, is my parents found a community of other people who were homeschooling, who had different skill sets. So like I had an English teacher throughout middle school who he taught me like a bunch of, I read like Greek mythology stuff then. And he was like, that was his specialty. That's what he knew about. But my mom wouldn't have, she could have done that, but she'd been learning it along with me. So for them, there's a lot of like, you find other people who are in your same situation and everyone pulls different skills. And that was a cool thing to learn. My mom is a really great communicator. She is awesome at leading people, and did just an amazing job at being able to go like above and beyond for her kids. And it's like, I think that's a really good thing to have instilled.
Yeah, for sure. Shout out to all the moms out there who are just, going 10 toes down for their children. And when I say 10 toes down, I mean really going, 100%, putting in all the effort that you possibly can to make sure that your child is getting what they need and really making sure that they can have the best possible outcome. So you're a proponent for homeschool.
Oh yeah, I think for a lot of kids, it can be a really good thing. And the weird thing with it is, growing up, there were kind of like 3 different levels of it that I would see. You would see kids who were like just a step away from Amish. They were the most homeschool kids. I knew kids who like made their own clothes and would like make a canoe out of like a hollowed out tree trunk.
Why?
And that is
why?
Why? It's 30 years later. I still have no idea why they were doing that.
Right.
They went really hard for that stuff. And then you would have, there's like a bigger group in the middle that was like kids more like me who are like, you're keeping up with what other kids your grade are doing. And then the kids that my heart really went out to was you would see a couple of kids who were like at-risk students. Like I knew a few kids who had gotten like expelled from school, and like doing it from home was like their last shot. Those kids were, I think for them, it's a really good setup too, because a lot of those kids need the extra attention. Or there's, sometimes like kids just fall behind. I think we all knew kids in high school who like, you had one bad year of math class and then you're done for that subject. You spend the rest of your high school years catching up on it.
Yeah.
That was me mostly for science. I was a bad science student. But it was having that as a background really taught me how like, okay, it's okay to catch up on things. It's okay to be behind. You just got to like be a little honest with yourself about where your strengths and weaknesses are.
Right. And so what were your challenges, if any, in terms of social life when as you got older?
Yeah. Oh, social life was like, as a kid, that was like a thing I had to put effort into, because you're just not seeing kids like I was seeing my mom and my sisters most days. So for me, it was like, I had to go out and meet all the kids in the neighborhood. Thank God for pickup basketball courts. If those didn't exist, I don't know how I would have met kids. And then like the big thing, like getting to high school, I think I waited until junior year to tell any of my friends I had been homeschooled. I don't know what I was telling people, but I know I was not, that freshman year for sure, I was not leading with like, I'm the new kid in school. My mom taught me everything I know. She's happy to be here. Like it's a weird, the stigma is not great, but the social thing is definitely, I'm like way more of an introvert than a lot of my friends. And I think that comes from just being used to doing my own thing. And yeah, I think it contributes a little bit.
Right. And then also the other interesting aspect to it is you kind of was accustomed to a learning in style environment, and where now we have the pandemic where essentially people have to do what you're used to doing.
Oh
And
yeah.
yeah, and so for me, I can see what you mean by doing the whole school day's work in a few hours, because once you understand your assignments and you understand, how to pull them out, and you get you a couple of notebooks and stuff like that, you can pretty much hammer your workout, and you don't have all the fluff of a full day schedule in there. You could just sit there and hammer it all out. So,
Oh yeah.
do you have any advice to kids who are essentially living a lifestyle that you mastered growing up?
Yeah, I would say like the big thing for me as a kid is I got a really ridiculous amount of input in what I was allowed to learn. It's like certain subjects, math, you're just going to learn math, but like history, English, if you're a kid right now who's not going to have a school year coming up, or you're going to have a really different looking school year, go out and find the things that interest you in those subjects. I was really big into like Greek mythology as a kid. I thought that stuff was super cool. I read way more of that than I ever would have if I was just reading, like whatever Harry Potter book or something that other kids were reading. With you can do the same thing with history, math. Find that like even with math, you can find things that are interesting that you can apply to. You can find a lot of like life skills stuff. I remember I learned how to like. I was really, as a kid, I would take things apart and put them back together all the time. Like I learned how to build a remote control when I was like 12 years old or something. And I think that's part of it is like, if you're a kid right now and you're going to have a school year, this is a great opportunity to figure out the things that are fun and interesting to you. That was actually kind of how I got into comedy. I didn't know as a kid that was a job a person could have. But I was a huge dork for it. When I was homeschooled, VH1 used to have old SNL and Conan O'Brien. They would show it in the middle of the day. So I would get all my schoolwork done as quick as I can. And I would watch that too. And I would go on like back in Napster days. I would download the audio from, oh yeah.
Hey,
Napster, Kazaa.
Napster was great. What else? Kaza.
Oh yeah. Kaza, LimeWire, all of it. You would wait like 3 hours to download one song. I'm not set up to have like Spotify on my phone right now. It's way too easy to get everything.
Right.
But yeah, if you're a kid, like right now is a great time. You can do a lot of life skills stuff. Like if you want to learn how a car works, you can go on YouTube, you can look at videos and you can figure out all that kind of like, I would say that would be the biggest thing is make sure you're doing stuff that is actively interesting to you. One of the mutual friend of ours has one of the coolest channels for that stuff. Stephen Cleary, you interviewed him, but he has that farm and he'll do videos showing how he makes like maple syrup and stuff. That kind of stuff I think is so interesting and so important. Especially like, there's a lot of talk now about colleges and if they are necessarily preparing people to go out into the workforce.
Right.
And I think there's a lot to be said for university. I think there's a lot of good stuff coming out of there. But if you want to learn like hard skills, now's a great time to go on like a coding website. There's free coding classes. You can do all that kind of stuff. Also, if anyone's watching, look me up. And if you're all going to be homeschooled, look me up. I'll put you in touch with my mom. All of her kids are out of the house now. And she has been going off about how everyone who's homeschooling is super prepared for this. She would give advice to anyone in a heartbeat. She is very giving about that.
Wow, that's a great pointer. So, Ms. Breeze, if you're out there, we could be potentially sending people your way because that's a great thing to be willing to consult about. So, try to get in touch with his mom. Also, I hope you didn't miss a comment. Stephen Cleary's in the building. He says, "Shout out to everybody."
Oh, what's up, Stephen?
Yeah. So, and then I also want to know, tell me, what was your favorite aspect of what was your favorite aspect, whether it be Zeus or any other mythological characters? Who was your favorite in that territory?
Oh, I think my favorite when I was growing up were all of the I didn't love like the gods were cool, but they were like unapproachable. I always loved like Hercules and like Odysseus, Achilles, all of the guys they were like elevated, but they had a weakness. There was always something really interesting about that because it was just enough that as a kid you're like, this is almost like reading a comic book, but they were kind of approachable because they all had like a fatal flaw or something to overcome.
Right.
that was always really fun for me.
That was one of the things. That was one of the things I liked about Achilles. Is like, I mean, he's unstoppable. He's thrashing people. He's here. He's there. Nobody can beat him. But if he should get hit in the ankle, you know,
Yeah.
the story comes to an end. Watch out for those ankles. Oh, yeah. Come on, man.
That stuff's great. This is going to send me down like a Wikipedia wormhole as soon as this is over. I'm not going to be able to get away from my computer.
Right. Yeah. And then so along those lines, you know, what did you think about Pokemon? Were you a big fan?
Okay, this is kind of a weird thing. I will say this about homeschool kids is we were all very sheltered around a few things. I was not Harry Potter and Pokemon. I was not allowed to play with those because there was some movement that going on that was saying that like they were witchcraft or something. I think in hindsight, a lot of those parents are like, oh, we may have gotten like a little overzealous on that. But I remember I had to I had a bunch of Pokemon cards that I had in secret and I had to get rid of all of them. But you know, the Harry Potter thing though, I will say that paid off in the long run because I know way too many people who are like 30 years old and then like the president will do something terrible and they'll go online and they'll be like, the president is Voldemort. And I'm like, this is embarrassing. You're a grown up.
Yeah. Talk about it. You're walking around acting like, you know, somebody's Dumbledore or, you know, in any other character. It's terrible. Also,
didn't it turn out that the woman who wrote all of those, like she started going back and being like, she was giving herself like extra credit later where she was like, you know, actually Dumbledore is gay. So I made him gay. That was pretty progressive of me. I didn't write it in the book, but I do it now.
Right.
Hermione. And then like she recently said Hermione's black because they said they were like, it's all white characters. That's bad. And she was like, well, it turns out. So I can't wait for whatever she's got cooked up next. I'm
sure Harry Potter was in foster care.
Yeah, she's gonna retake like the staircase thing out of it and be like, it was a foster home, and actually that's
yeah.
If she does that, you should get a royalty check.
Yeah, that's a fact. Yeah, hopefully she sees this broadcast and takes the bait. So okay, so obviously you pretty much you got into high school. Did you meet all kinds of friends in high school? And when did you kind of start realizing that you had a mind for comedy? When did you kind of start realizing that you were going to do something so extroverted when in fact you were an introvert?
It took a long time. Like high school, I think really one of the really like good building blocks for me was I had a PE class my freshman year. I was in the weightlifting class with Coach E. And he took me aside one day and he's like, you should play football. And I probably weighed like 115 pounds when he said that. Like there was no reason for him to say it. But it was a really good situation for me. Just cause like part of, you know, I needed to have people that I saw every day to feel more like myself. And that helped me come out of my shell a little bit. Cause if I, you know, it like you were on the team with me. It really like, it just, you see these people twice a day in the summer for 2 days. You see them every morning when you're waking up and like running and lifting. You see them at practice after school. And it just like, it makes you feel a little more comfortable being yourself. Like that really helped me come out of my shell. I was never like overtly, I think I got my senior superlative. I think it was like teacher's pet. Like I was not a class clown kid. I was like funny to friends. And I will say, teacher's pet is not far from class clown because I got out of so much homework if I could just make a teacher laugh. If you can make a grown-up laugh and you're a kid, you're golden. It makes your life so easy.
That's a fact. That's a fact. Hey, but we're not going to skip past football. And weren't those squats terrible? Weren't they just to die for?
Dude, they were the worst. I was not built for. I remember they had the 1,000-pound club, and that was if you could do 3 lifts and they added up to 1,000 pounds.
Yeah.
And I think I got to like 600 pounds on those 3. Yeah. I was not.
Hey.
That was Well, you were diesel. You were yoked the first time I saw you. Hey, I think I saw you bang out 100 push-ups in one set, like the first day of practice.
For sure, but the squats were killing me.
You and me both have chicken legs. I just have chicken arms to go with it.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. The squats were knee breaking.
Oh, God. And the worst one was if you got in trouble, like if you talk back to a teacher or like you got whatever you were found like being late to class, they'd make you stay after and they'd put the chains on the side and you had to do 100 squats.
Yeah.
And then the next day, like I could not feel my legs the next day.
Right.
That was like a mistake you made like once or twice a year.
Right. So sports pretty much got you active socially and actually built confidence in you, gave you an opportunity to overcome some adversities and made you a better person. Did you take a knack for sports? Did you get into involved in any other sports?
Kind of. I pole vaulted my senior year and I was wrestling team 1 year. One of the things that was really good for me though is our school had a coach through the Cincinnati Bengals, an academic coach. We had Coach Carey.
Okay.
And she would like help tutor students and like she did SAT prep and stuff. But she helped me set up my senior year. I was doing a tutoring program where I would take student athletes down to one of the elementary schools and we would help out in a first grade class. Mm-hmm. And that was like probably one of the better experiences I got out of football. Just because I got to, first of all, like anytime you volunteer, it's partly for the person that you're helping out. They're certainly getting something out of it or you're doing it wrong. But a huge part of it is you get something out of it. Right. You get a chance to give back and you get a chance to, really, really feel like you're helping someone out. So I tutored to the end of high school and a little bit through college. And that was one of the better experiences for me just because like I got to meet adults who had full-time jobs. Like you meet the teachers and they talk to you like you're a grown-up because you're coming in and helping them out with stuff. Mm-hmm. So that was huge for me as far as like coming out of my shell. And also just like the great thing about sports is it's like the biggest, it just flattens the playing ground. It's really hard to give someone a pass for something if they're not doing their job, like out on the field. So like, you can be funny or charming or popular or whatever. If you're not making your times when we're running like sprints and stuff, and then we all have to run again, that person doesn't get a pass. Like if you're not doing your blocking assignment and someone gets tackled because of you, right? There's nothing you can really do to get over that. So it's like that part of it is like indispensable. Just teaching you like do your job, show up and make sure you do, and be responsible for what you said you would do.
Mm-hmm. Now, how do you pole vault? What's up with that?
Dude, the way you pole vault is you have to be way too slow to make it on the 4x4 team. Right. And you want to do something with your friends your senior year. Like that was the whole thing. Was football ended and I wanted to keep hanging out with all my friends from football. And the only sport that was coming up was track. So I was like, all right, I'm going to find a way to get on the track team. Mm-hmm. And I knew I was slow. I wasn't going to do that. I tried to run with the cross country guys for a little bit to see if that might happen. I was way behind on that. Those guys were all trained up. And I think, do you remember, I think it was Ronte Harrison. He was like a really good high jumper. And he was like, we had just gotten like a new facility we had pole vault equipment for the first time. We never had anyone do it. And he came up to me, he's like, hey, we can score some points at meets if you'll try and do this. You want to give it a try? And I was like, sure. So I went and talked to the athletic director and I was like, can we get the equipment for this? And I went and did that. And I went and found, because we didn't have a coach for it yet, I found a coach at the University of Cincinnati. I found a guy who was pole vaulting there, this guy, Chris Smith, who I think at the time he had the University of Cincinnati's record in the pole vault. And I met him at this camp where I was like, everyone there had been jumping for a few years. They were all going way up. I didn't know what I was doing at all. So I asked him, like, can I get some pointers? And this dude, like, you meet one of these people and it changes your mind about how you should treat people on the way up. He immediately went and got me a pair of his running spikes, like to jump in. Mm-hmm. And he started teaching me like the very beginning basics, which I know had to be super boring for him because this guy ended up going to the Olympic trials. He was like very, very good at what he was doing. So he gave me some lessons for that. And then he would let me reach out to him throughout the season of like, hey, now I'm learning how to do this. What do I do next? And I ended up doing okay. and basically, honestly, the other thing too is it's exactly like doing tackling drills. You just run really hard, and then your body kind of takes an impact, and then you go up in the air. But yeah, I ended up doing that, and then for 1 year I tried to walk on at college, and that's just a different type of athlete. I was able to stick around a little bit, but I was not nearly on the same level as those dudes. But yeah, it's a scary sport because you're shooting yourself up and over a thing, and then you land on this big foam pad. And when I started getting a little bit better, the new problem became I would go up, and then I was like, oh, I might not land on the pad. I'm going up in the air, but I'm shooting off in different directions. So it got to be a little bit scary towards the end. It was like, thank God I would not do that now. I injure too easy now. But back then, when you're like 18, you can hit the ground from 10 feet up and walk around the next day and be okay.
Did people do that? Were people vaulting themselves in the air and then landed on the ground?
Yeah, dude, there was a guy from Coleraine, and he was the only guy I saw do this. He jumped and he had a bicycle helmet on every time he jumped.
Right.
And we all made fun of him.
Makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it was the first piece of equipment you would guess someone should have.
Yeah.
And we would all make fun of, look at him, he's got a helmet on, this moron. And then we would go up and like shoot ourselves backwards and like mess up our shoulders and stuff. Yeah, it was I'm sure, I bet now they've changed it. Like there's a ton of stuff from football. I know like high schools now don't do it the way we used to. And I would bet that's probably one of those sports that like schools are way more strict about the safety on. But yeah, that was a fun one too, because it was the first sport I did that you were really by yourself. It was just me and one coach. And it that really stepped up the level of like, all right, learn to do something on your own, learn to be responsible for your own training and preparation. Because if I messed up, there was no like, oh, someone blew the snap count. It was like, no, I didn't prepare well for this.
Right. One thing that I'm taking out of that is, if I heard you correctly, you said you went and found a coach yourself?
Yeah. I mean, I found a camp at University of Cincinnati, and then I found a coach there. Like I stumbled onto it a little bit, but I was definitely like trying to find resources to help me out.
That's great. And another thing that I think is interesting is when you look, anytime I observe a sport, I'm trying to think, why is this a sport? And not why, because I don't think that the physical movements of it are valid, but I know that there's a hidden challenge in there that I just don't understand because I never did it before.
Yeah.
But when I think about somebody trying to launch themselves over a bar, and if they don't do it right, that they can fall, they can hurt themselves, they can fall on their shoulders, or like you said, you could, hurt your head or something like that. That kind of paints the picture clearly for me that pole vaulting is not easy. It's actually a tough sport.
Oh yeah. I honestly, there's like anything that people compete at that's like a real sport. I've learned there's certain stuff you want to make fun of, but anything that people are training like that at, there's other people doing it at a high level. And if you want to compete, those like you're making sacrifices. You're really pushing yourself to do some of that stuff. That was why I was impressed with you in high school, because I saw you pick up 2 sports in your first year, and not immediately, but over time with putting work in, you became like competitive at 2 sports. Like I think I saw you play your first year of football. I think I saw you do your first year of wrestling, and both of those you figured out pretty quickly. And wrestling was one. It's like I was very happy to be much smaller than you because it's all about weight class. And I remember it was you and a couple other guys that I was like, I got to stay skinny because if I have to wrestle either of those guys, it's not going to be fun.
Right. And and one thing I would say too before we go to break, first of all, everybody, we're talking to Dan Dries. This man is getting ready to transform with the next half of this interview, so I want you to stay tuned. But before we go for a quick break, I want to say, I have a lot of respect for the sport of wrestling as well. Wrestling is one of those sports that is based off of respect because it's you and one other person. And just like Dan was saying, it's partially a one-man sport, and it takes a lot of mental fortitude. So much respect to all the wrestlers out there. But we'll be right back after a brief message. And we've got some special things coming today with Mr. Dan Dries.
All right.
America's Next Motivator, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern, Tuesday and Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern. America's Next Motivator, hosted by Cedric Riley and sponsored by our good friends at 4D Healthwear. And we're back. What's up with the earpods? Are you listening to it? Are you listening to your favorite album while you're doing this interview?
No, I am. I'm back. I'm back at my parents' house. My little sister got married over the weekend, so we did a really small family-only ceremony. So I'm trying not to upset them or have them overhear anything while I'm back at their house. Yeah. Also, I've been messing around. I've been doing a lot of shows now, like for comedy. People are trying stuff out right now. It's like kind of, you can't really do live stuff in light of the pandemic. So there's been a lot of stuff online, and I'm messing around with I've had like a bunch of different mic setups. I've been trying to learn all the tech and get my sound as good as possible. So AirPods right now have been the thing that have been going for me. But yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I've screwed it up too, trying to go too big. Like I had a whole soundboard and I had sound drops for a second and a mic. And if it worked, it was really cool, but it failed like half the time because I just didn't know how to set it up well enough.
Right. Yeah. The equipment thing is major these days with everything going virtual. And you don't want to be looking like an airplane pilot for no reason.
No.
Okay, let's get into another part of your story. How did you get into comedy?
Yeah, it was kind of a combination of two things when I was in college. The first thing was there was this weird phenomena that happened at my college. Every year, these like street preachers would show up, and some of them were really good. Some of them were like, they were on their game. They knew what they were talking about. But there was this one guy who started showing up who was kind of like a doom and gloom preacher. He was this guy from somewhere down south. His name was, I think it was Brother Jed. And he would he would go up and he would talk about like all the different people that are going to hell. He was very anti-science and very anti-gay. And I remember someone had this idea that they were like, we're going to do a silent sit-in of Brother Jed to protest him, which on its face sounded good. But I also was like, this guy's not wired like a normal person. He's just going to assume you're an audience and he's going to keep going. It's not going to like intimidate him into not saying stuff. And he also didn't have like a speaker system or a megaphone. So he was just as loud as anyone else who could talk. So I just stood behind him for like an hour and made fun of everything he was saying.
Yeah.
I roasted him. It was anytime like we were on the bus back home from a game and everyone got made fun of. I just did that to him for as long as I could. And then like a couple weeks later, there was a stand-up competition at my college that was being run through TBS. And I'd never done stand-up. I listened to it all. I was a huge fan of it. I was like, I was kind of feeling myself after having like a little public speaking moment. So I was like, all right, we'll give this a try. And I ended up, I advanced out of that competition into like the next round and then the next round, and got like a little bit of notice and kind of figured out what I was doing. And I ended up meeting a guy who was a big comedian in Chicago at the time, at one of these clubs that we were doing one of the contests at. And I was just asking him like, I'm in my senior year. I think I like comedy. I'm not really sure. What do you like? What's your advice? And he told me, he's like, you got to go. Chicago's where I started. It's a great place to learn. If I were you, I would go there and try it out. And I was like, yeah, all right, I'll give it. I had a job offer there. So I was like, yeah, I think I can do this. And I got out there and I ended up meeting a ton of really great people, and getting a chance to learn, and learn I was bad for like 6 months. I was terrible. It's one of those things that like, you do it in like a smaller scene. Like Cincinnati has some stand up, but it's not huge. What I didn't know is Chicago was like maybe the third biggest comedy scene in the country.
Really?
So, oh yeah, I got out there and within like a week, I saw Hannibal Buress in like just the back of a bar telling jokes, and
Wow.
now he's got like multiple Netflix specials. He's been on Comedy Central a bunch of times. He's been in movies with like John Hamm, and then like you would see that, and then on the inverse side, you would also see like at the beginning part they have open mics, so anyone can go on stage, and you would see people who were out of their mind. You would see people who had no mental faculties at all. Like there was, I remember one time I was really new and I can't even remember what it was. I had some awful joke about how bad it is to be a homeless person and it doesn't look fun. And I don't think I could do that. I was just a bad joke. And then I got off stage and the next guy to get on stage was a homeless person, like a fully homeless man. And I felt that was like, it changed my mind. I'm like, oh, you can't do that. At the same time, it was one of those things where I was like, all right, I gotta learn to get to whatever the next level is, because I'm pretty sure that Chris Rock is not ever being followed by a homeless person right after he gets off stage. So I have to figure out whatever the next thing is, because this is not the right path. Right. But yeah, it's a really good, it's all trial and error. Like there's not a lot of coaching for it. So if it's a really fun thing to learn if you like picking yourself apart a little bit or trying to learn a new skill. But it's at the front, it's very rough.
So, a couple of things I want to unpack here about you being a comedian. To me, comedy is one of the most important art forms that we have in humanity, because what comedians have a way of doing is getting in the middle of very sensitive issues or topics that people are dealing with and dissecting them in a way that makes people laugh. And most people can do that. In fact, if you can do that, that makes you a very valuable person in society. Some of my favorite people are comedians, and I think that the art of it is one of the most complex things that there are. So how do you draw inspiration?
A lot of it's just writing every day, trying to take some time every day to write about stuff. It's not all going to come out funny, but you just kind of think like, what's affecting me right now? What is making me feel strongly about something? And sometimes like you'll start doing a joke or you'll do something new and it's not getting a lot of love. It's not getting what you think it should be. But one thing that it's always been a good indicator for me, and this is like maybe a little lazy of me, but it's really never steered me wrong, is if I can talk to anyone who watched a show afterwards and see like what did they remember? Because usually with stand-up, people will know like I laughed, but I have a hard time remembering things. Like they won't know specific jokes. But I've had a few jokes that it's every time someone will be like, oh, I relate to that. That's something that was hard for me or something that I went through. And even if I don't think it's the funniest joke, I'll keep working on that thing because I know like, oh, that means something to someone. That's important to a person. So yeah, those are the jokes that are like, those are the things I really look for.
And who inspires you? Who inspires you? Like name your top 5 comedians.
That's all time. Oh, man. All time. Chappelle is probably number 1. There's no one who touches Dave Chappelle. Yeah. That guy, and also like that guy has the most principles. Right now, there's a ton of comedians who are like looking to apologize for whatever they said. Like they have no conviction behind it. Yeah. And I don't think Chappelle has ever said anything that he doesn't feel like he can back up. And he also never says like, I'm absolutely right. If he thinks he messes up, he'll be like, yeah, I was wrong at the time. I don't apologize for it. People are wrong. Right. He's really good. There's a guy that I like a lot who used to write for The Simpsons named Dana Gould, who he's not like super well known, but he's one of those guys that like people who are really into stand up find him. Oh, there's this guy. I think he's going to be one of the next people that everyone knows is like a household name. Rory Scovel. He's got a bunch of Netflix specials. He's been in some movies and stuff. He's incredibly funny. I've seen him do. I did a weekend with him, and he did 4 shows, and he did a different show every night. And that's there are guys who they'll do it their whole life and never do that much material. And then one other guy I like just because I found him when he was on the rise. This guy Dan Soder. I'm not sure how many people know him as a comedian, but if he's on the show Billions on Showtime, and he was one of the first guys that first professional comics I got to open for. And
which character is he on Billions?
He's Mafi.
Okay.
He's he's like one of the stockbroker guys. But one of the first guys I got to open for, and usually you hear all this stuff about you get to open for a headliner. They're going to be mean to you. They're not going to talk to you. Don't say hi to them. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to get in this guy's face. And I used to do this joke about Coach E did this thing with me all the time because he knew I was like a little guy on the team, where if one of the really good players would mess up, he'd wave me over and he'd give a speech to that guy about me where he'd be like, "Oh, Jesus Christ, Davis, running out of bounds. Not like Drees over here would. Were we to ever put him in the game, all right?"
Right.
And Coach would just rag on me. And I did that joke in front of him, and he grabbed me afterwards and he goes, "That's a good joke." And then he gave me a bunch of lines that I could put into it and pointers. And I was blown away because this is a guy who's this is his job. He was watching me and he was getting ready to go on stage. He was looking at notes. He was getting ready to do his job. But he was willing to take just a little bit of time to give me advice. And I was like, oh, that's huge. If I ever get to that point, I want to be that kind of guy. I want to be the guy who is not too big for his britches to help out other people.
Right.
Yeah.
And now I want to know, how do you, because one day I expect to see you on a Netflix special or, however you figure out how to produce that, me and some of my viewers will definitely be tuning in. How do you create a special? I've long wondered that.
Yeah. There's a lot of different approaches. In America, that's the cool thing about stand-up too. It's a very uniquely American art form. It originated here. Other countries, there's parts of the world, it's just now starting to be a thing people do.
Really?
Oh yeah. It's because in America, the way it goes is a lot of specials are, they're all over the place. They talk about 10 or 15, 20 things throughout 1 hour. Mm-hmm. And it's not necessary. The only thing really connecting it is the personality of the person on stage or their point of view. But then one thing that's kind of growing, and it started happening mostly in England and Scotland, is they'll do these shows that are just about one thing the whole time. So they'll do a show that has a whole arc, and it's this is all about, what it's like to travel to other countries, or this is all about the 1 year I worked at a zoo or something. They'll have one specific theme. There was a really popular special that came out in the last year that was that called Nanette, or in the last couple of years. I think that's 2-3 years old. But that style is starting to get a little bit of love. I really I grew up on Chappelle. I would love to have, if I had 5 minutes that could be as good as anything in a Chappelle special, I would lose my mind. That would be amazing. But I really like that style where you're just talking about a lot of different things and you're moving around.
So let me ask you, how does a comedian remember all that content? Sometimes I'm not even listening to the comedy anymore as much as I'm just simply impressed that they've remembered all of that content and landed it without seeming like they were trying to figure something out.
You know what a really good trick is? And if you're ever at a comedy club again and you get to see this, is a lot of guys they'll have a napkin. Usually you're just up there, it's mic, stool, and then the person. And they'll put their drink on a stool and then they'll start talking. And one guy taught me this, and then I started noticing a ton of people do it, is they'll have bullet points written down on the napkin that they're putting the drink on. So they'll finish whatever joke, they'll get their big laugh, and then they'll lean over to take a drink and look how casual I am. I'm having a drink in the middle of my joke. What they're doing is they're looking at a bulleted set list. They're seeing bullet points of all the next things they're going to talk about.
Right.
So like when I started, I wrote everything out word for word. I was real meticulous. I knew exactly where I was going to turn and what inflection point was going where. And then slowly you start getting more comfortable with how you talk. So now when I write out a joke, I don't write a full punchline. It's not like a paragraph that comes out. I'll write a setup and it'll be like one sentence. And then I'll write maybe one or two words and I'll know that's the words I want to end on. And I'll figure out how to get to that. And then I'll have whatever the next thing is. And it'll be like, if I'm doing like 15 minutes of stand up, I'll probably write down 10 things on a piece of paper and that'll be enough to get me through. So you start figuring out, like, you write your own shorthand sort of. So I know like, yeah, what words are going to get me to the next thing. One thing that I did when I started that it was like kind of good on the long term is I got really into like, all right, if I'm going to be talking about two things that aren't related, I need to be able to have something I say in between that like gets me from, talking about getting my car stolen to, talking about when I played high school football. So I need like a line that can go in between those two things.
Right.
And I started figuring out how to sequence jokes so it didn't feel like I was just jumping from non sequitur to non sequitur.
Give me an example.
So you learn tricks, but yeah.
Give me an example.
Let's see. Like I used to have I have this joke about how I had a speech impediment when I was a little kid. I couldn't say words with R's in them.
You want to tell it? You want to tell it?
Yeah, I can tell it.
Okay, all right, listen, hold on. Let's build it up. Listen.
No, don't build it up. Don't build it up. I'm going to say it as conversationally as I can because there's no mic, there's no lights.
All right.
But when I was a kid, I had this speech impediment where I couldn't say words with R's in them. And when you're a really little kid, that's not that embarrassing of a problem. It's almost like endearing because you would say things like, I would say like, my mom is the prettiest girl in the world. Right. And like from a 4-year-old, that's adorable. Like no one wants that to go away. Your parents love it. But then you start getting older and it starts being like a little uncomfortable for everyone because I would start saying things like, I have a learner's permit. And that's creepy. No one liked hearing that one.
Right.
And I always thought like, man, I'm glad my parents fixed that. But there's a small part of me that always wonders like what it would have been like if they never fixed it. And I was just like the world's most bitter, confused 55-year-old man. I'm just like, hi, my name's Dan. I'm terribly addicted to heroin.
Hey, let me ask you something.
Yeah.
Is there a formula for humor? Is there a formula for humor? And the reason why I ask you that is because sometimes I think about how to come up with something funny. And I think it has something to do with completion of an idea. And like when you complete an idea and how you complete an idea. But even that doesn't always make it funny. I think there's got to be a formula to it. What you got any thoughts on that?
There's definitely, yeah. What you said was kind of spot on because, like, there's this thing where it's like you kind of figure out a puzzle. You get sort of the same part of your brain goes off as when you like learn something new. Like you get all the information and then it all leads to the same point, and that's always really fun. But there's also like all these little tricks. Like there's rule of threes, which is this thing where like you set a pattern where you'll say, all right, it's this, and then you change the pattern. So you'll see that a lot in comedy. There's like a lot of different like joke formats that I think people will plug stuff into. It's the reason why, like, if you go on Twitter, everyone's kind of doing the same jokes because those formats get figured out really quickly. Mm-hmm. I would say, I don't know, the biggest thing is just, I think it's like just those moments that you have with like close friends where you find something. Like I can't explain why this is one of my favorite jokes, but I have a buddy who did this joke and it made me laugh so hard. And most of the time I tell people it doesn't make them laugh, but in the moment it made me laugh really hard, where he did this thing where you go, all right, everybody, I'm a world-class impressionist. I'm going to do 100 impressions in the next minute. And then he would go, all right, first one, Bill Clinton. I did not have sex with that woman. And then he'd go, all right, next one, Bart Simpson. Homer is my best friend. And then he'd keep going, and he just kept doing the Bill Clinton voice, and he would just do a million where he'd be like, all right, Mario, Luigi is my brother. And he just did that over and over and over again. I don't know why it made me laugh. I think it's, if I describe it, it's really dumb. But
Yeah.
I think there's something about, like, for certain people, it's just like the thing that is specifically funny about you that just translates for some reason.
Right.
And then there's also people who just like they can just write a joke. They can just write it out and it's good immediately. There's a guy, there's this dude, Dan Mintz, who was like, he's one of the voices on Bob's Burgers. And he just has this album that's an hour long, and it's a joke every 15 seconds. He just knows how to write that. And there are just some people who figure that out. And then there's guys like, I think Chappelle's very much the opposite, where he starts talking and kind of the more he unwinds and the more you get behind his point of view, the more it's like everything he says is funny because I'm starting to think like him. Yeah, those guys are like, there's some sort of magic to that they're doing alchemy. It's not, most people never get there.
Yeah. Comedians are special people. What role do you see comedy playing on the world stage in 2020 and beyond?
Actually, this is a really interesting time for it. I think for the last couple of years, comedy's been in a not ideal place. Because, the state of the country, I think we all knew things weren't super great. Everyone was a little on edge with each other, but it hadn't really been said out loud. It wasn't super in the forefront. It was very, you could kind of tell that people were a little distrustful of each other all the time. And you would say certain things, like as a stand-up, there were certain things I said on stage that I would realize, you'd see people pulling back from. And in the past couple of months, just watching what people are putting out online, I think that's changed a little bit. I think people are a little more honest with each other right now about what's going on. I think we could be in a really interesting place for all of it in the next couple of months, really. Right. Just because everyone's been inside their houses for the last couple of months. No one's that polite anymore.
Yeah, we all need a level of comedic relief, and so people are looking for comedians, So hey, I look forward to your things that you're doing online. Hopefully someday offline, in print, in media. And where can people find you if they want a comedian for an event or for a virtual event? How can people find you?
Easiest way to find me is just on social media. I'm on Instagram at DreezyDan, so DRESSYDAN.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you say DREESSY?
DREESYDAN.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was that. I had a website that I took down recently because it was all for booking live events, and I was like, I don't want to encourage people to come out to live events right now.
Right.
Yeah. It's a fun time right now too, though, because people are like learning new skills. Like everyone's got to figure out how to make and edit their own like video content online. People are learning how to write stuff long form. A lot of people are kind of figuring out these like secondary skills that they didn't develop before. So it is a really interesting time just to see like who's figuring out what.
For sure. Hey, as we wrap up this interview, I know time flies when you're having fun. We've had some laughs throughout. I think that you are a very bright personality, and we're going to see some great things coming out of you in the future. I have 3 questions for you that I ask all my guests, and you can answer it either comedically or directly. The first, and we have to answer them quickly. The first is, what is survival to you?
Survival is not giving up.
Yeah.
Right. Just outlasting the other guy.
Yeah, outlasting the other guy. Okay. And what is success to you?
Not money, or I would not be doing stand-up.
Okay.
Being happy.
Yeah. And what is greatness to you?
Being memorable. Doing anything that sticks with people. I think that's the hardest thing to do. Dan, when I first realized that you were doing comedy, I started watching your videos and I started,
tuning into what you're doing right away. I want to let you know that what you're doing right now is great. It's an honorable thing. And the gift that you're using, it can make people feel better. And when you use your gift to make people feel better, that's something that people will never forget. That's one of the things that makes you great. And I'm going to give you your crown today. I'm going to give you your respect today and let you know you're now part of the Pride Empowerment Network. And you, my friend, are one of America's next motivators.
Cedric, I appreciate it, man. What you do is way harder. Being sincere about it all the time that's work. You really put yourself out there. I get to hide a little bit. I respect the hell out of what you do, man.
Hey, well, listen, looks like we got one more comment that came from Brian Lee. He said, awesome show today. Shout out to Brian Lee. Hey, shout out to everybody that was in the building today. We had a great show. We had some smiles. We had some laughs and some humor. This is a rising star right here for sure. And please, everybody, tune in tomorrow because we'll be talking to another person who's going to be coming on our platform and talking about how he is working to be America's next motivator. But for now, that's all we have with Dan Dries. I'll see you guys next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.
See ya.